Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite sales podcast. I'm your host, Ross Rich, and today we have a special guest, fellow CEO and founder. We have Christian here of UserGems. You might have heard of them. They're all over the place making waves with their incredible product. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us here today.
Hey Ross, excited to chat.
Amazing, amazing. Well, today we're talking about what we talk about as usual, driving execution excellence, but a bit of a spin on it today. We're not just going to be talking about mainly sales stuff. We're going to talk across BDRs, AEs, CSMs, how we all row in the same direction to drive that execution excellence, to drive those results for our sales teams. Hard enough on one team or with one individual to coach and make sure that's happening. Hard across organizations, and really excited to dig into this topic today. But before we get into it, Christian, would love to hear, for the folks that don't know about you, a bit about your background and kind of the why and how you ended up starting UserGems, and then we can dive into the details.
Yes, happy to chat. Hey everyone, so I'm CEO and co-founder of UserGems. I'm originally from Austria, studied engineering there, and then came over to the US, did my MBA in Chicago, and then together with my identical twin brother, we started this company. And I think that there are two things that are really interesting. Like we pivoted our way into it. Was always we were always very interested in like using engineering and a lot of data to solve like the sales problem in a sense. So we already, even in our previous products, we always had like a lot of internal information, which in our case, even back then was like purchasing information, or you have sales data, and then you have a lot of public information in the internet, and how can you combine this?
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us, it was always like, we are identical twins, aka we're pretty much the same. And it was, both of us are engineers. And at some point, the question was like, so one of us like should be doing the selling part, because I think that's equally important as the product part.
Yeah.
And I was in the US, he was in Europe. Even though I only studied engineering, he actually studied business. But I was in the US and I was like, all right, you're in the US, that's where the market is. So you go out there and
You're the
sell.
sales guy now.
Yes, you're the sales guy. Exactly. And I 100% was way more comfortable being the engineer than being the salesperson. And I think it really shows that you can learn this, because I remember the very first sales like conversations I had, a part of me was hoping this person never picks up or never joins the Zoom call. And now it's very, very easy, very comfortable doing this. So you can 100% learn this.
I love it. I love it. That's so funny. Yeah, my brother and I, for those listeners out there that don't know, I also started, one of our co-founders of Accord is my brother. We're not identical, but yeah, both were actually in the sales world. And then he was the one that had to pick up a product to start with our other technical co-founders. So
both of you wanted to do both of you wanted to do the sales part. Again, one had to do the product first. It's the other way around.
Exactly, but he should have probably been an engineer. But enough about that. So today we're going to be talking about, as I mentioned, not just focusing on execution excellence when it comes to sales, but across the go-to-market org. Force multiply if you can figure this out, but this is very, very challenging to do. I don't think anyone feels like, oh, the dog's freaking out. I don't think anyone feels like they do a good job about this, but we'll talk about maybe what we wish we were doing across these teams. So Christian, if you want to kick us off, maybe we'll start at the top of funnel.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, when we talk driving execution excellence, then for me, I talk so often about this is not just an individual, but it's usually we have an organization. We have either like a sales team where we have one layer or several layers. Like we need to make sure that what we want each individual seller to do like arrives correctly and they know what to do. And I always say this is kind of like you have two ways of doing this, and it's kind of like a spectrum. You either have sales enablement, and this is like it's either sales enablement or CS enablement, but the idea is that you continuously train people. Like you train every single person that arrives new, and you train every single person probably every 6 months, because stuff changes and people forget stuff. Or you have sales operations. It's like, how much of this can I actually like automate or take away from them?
Yeah.
And I feel like every organization is on that like spectrum, and wherever you are, like you have different challenges.
Yeah.
But we like so many of our conversations is how much of what is currently being done by sales enablement can you actually push into sales operations and make sure that stuff is being done for them? And I remind.
Sounds like you might be an engineer.
Yeah, it's actually what I started the company with. And so, yes, I certainly over-index on can this be solved by technology instead of humans? No, but it's always in support of how can I make this easier? Because I think it's so easy for us to say, hey, by the way, dear seller, SDR, AE, please do this one more thing as well. But in reality, we're giving them like the 19th thing, and it's just the human that either we forget how to do this thing or the one that we maybe did in the past. But it's like this understanding that at any point in time, I can only do a certain number of things really well. And so asking someone to do one more thing, which we continue like constantly do every single week, there's another request. By the way, now, and like in our case, we want to be everywhere on LinkedIn. So please also write like 2 LinkedIn posts a week, everyone. And it means that there's certainly another thing that they can't do as well anymore.
Yeah, I think you make a good point around it's not necessarily that all those things are the 19 things are challenging. What's challenging is to operationalize doing the 19 things consistently and the changing of context. Because if you want people to be really good at their thing, focus on, this part of the customer journey, whatever it is. Okay, well, that's now one of 18 things. And yes, maybe it's what you're trying to get them to spend 80% on, but the other pieces that are supposed to be the 20%, the context switching, I think is the big challenge there, like you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially like because we talk top of funnel, I think what we all agree on, like outbound is harder than ever before. We remember the good old times where we just selected an account, wrote like 5 people, 5 emails, and we got good responses. Now we need to be spear phishing. And that means we need to be extremely accurate and precise in the first place who we are reaching out to, and we're already using different signals for it. Like we want to look into our closed last accounts. We want to look into who maybe shows on LinkedIn that they're potentially interested in my solution. Are there any other signals that could show me that this person is interested? So I'm already looking at like 5 different places to find someone that could be interested in. Then I need to find the contact. Then I need to create a messaging. So really, we are asking our reps, they have to, like in order to be successful right now, you need to do many more things than before.
Yeah.
And it can't go on like this, where we just ask them, hey, by the way, now do this one more thing as well. So whenever we're asking them to do things more in a precise manner, we need to think about also how can technology help with that?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and I'd love to get your take on this. As a fellow executive, is the difference between helping people understand what they need. I love how you put it. It's not just, telling them what to do, or how some people put it, micromanaging. It's helping people understand what they need to do to be successful. And I feel like there's this really weird cultural tension between that. And I don't know what has happened. Like I've always loved, direction. Maybe it's kind of, playing sports before, or, being at, like a, more old school, private school growing up where it was like, very tops down and all those things. It's like, I love direction, but direction helps you be creative, because then you can like, hey, this is the core thing. Now figure out how to put your spin on it. And I feel like there is kind of this cultural pushback around anything associated with telling people how to help, do their job. I'm curious to get your take on that piece.
Yeah, I actually like the sport metaphor that you mentioned. Like, I talked to a sales leader who said exactly that. Like, what you do in sport is you practice one movement like 50 times until it comes naturally, and then the next movement, and you have.
And you're coached on it, and you're nitpicked on it, because you know that if you can do these few things really freaking well and put it together, then you're going to be excellent. But why don't we do any of that stuff, professionally?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it should be in the interest of the individual as well. Like the more the more someone tells me exactly how to do it. I actually think, I think that's a completely different topic. I also think that, I think that leaders should be very opinionated obviously it ultimately needs to work out, but they should be very opinionated. I think vendors should also be very opinionated. Like UserGems as a
100%.
product is very opinionated in what, we are the expert in the solution we are offering, and that's why we have the experience and we're very strong opinion. And the same should be true with leaders. Like I want my leaders to be opinionated, because they should know how it's done right. Otherwise, I did a mistake in hiring those leaders.
I totally agree. And it's funny. I just heard this yesterday and it killed me. It was like, someone mentioned this vendor that they were using that was like, very hot and, out there all the time. And then I was like, oh, what's your experience with that? I haven't heard someone really use it. And it was like, it was terrible. I was like, what happened? They're like, oh, it was our fault. We didn't have the right data for this. We didn't do this. I'm like, that's crazy to me. Like, you weren't successful with it. That's your responsibility because you didn't have this. And like, no, that's part of the discovery. That's part of setting up for success. That's the expectations that are being set. That's how they're doing this. Like, your success. People today don't want to buy tools to figure out how to use internally. They want to buy solutions and outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think that's now the expectation. And you're going to have a ton of churn. And if you don't build, and I mean, this will probably come to it as part of like the strategy around CSMs and AEs of like setting the right expectations and making your customers successful. Everyone needs to row in that direction from the first message that your customer gets, right?
Yeah, yeah. And once again, I think also for CSMs, there's so many like, small tasks that we ask them to do. But I mean, coming back to the SDR, it's what I find. What motivated me actually quite a bit is like when we talk AI in sales, then for many there were ads that say like don't hire humans, like hire a AE for that. Would there's two big thoughts on this. Like the first one is actually what we started to find really overwhelming is having too many, like in our case, we like just to quickly talk, like UserGems is a signals based platform. Like we help you identify signals and then orchestrate your sales and marketing process around what are the top performing signals and what is the messaging. And what we found quite difficult is actually once you have too many signals to orchestrate all of them. Like, because then you go into detail and saying like, I want, like, let's say this is a past champion that joined an account that was an open up account 6 months ago, and they just visited my website. Like I have a workflow with like 3 ifs. And then I want one where it's like, it's a new hire, but not a past champion and this and that. And we came to like 35 different workflows because it's kind of like what we're actually asking our SDRs to do. Like when you reach out, check all of these signals and then adapt the messaging based on this. And we said, all right, how about we actually like go more in this direction of the sales operations? Can we create workflows for them?
Yeah.
But then we actually realized suddenly we were sitting at 35 workflows. We weren't done yet, and it got completely overwhelming.
Yeah.
But that's actually where AI is really good at like getting a whole lot of information, regardless of whether this applies or not, and distilling it down and preparing something for the SDR.
Yeah.
And so that's where we arrived at. Like, a lot of people see AI as like, hey, let me replace humans. We see that like there's actually something that AI is uniquely good at where it's really difficult for the human. And where can we find this? And for us, it was use AI, distill down a lot of information, a lot of signals, and then prepare it for the human.
So so what in that case, what additional value from the people perspective do you get to train them on and then be excellent at when they don't have to think about the 38 different workflows that they're learning in a new company with the product and all this stuff? Like, what do you see as, I actually see the bar getting higher from a human perspective with these tools. So what, in this use case with BDRs, what do you think they're going to be able to get better at? What are you asking your team to get better at since they no longer have to think about all that stuff?
Yeah. The first place is I think there are signals we can automatically identify and then signals we can't, which is maybe if you have a personal relationship or personal experience with the company, like anything that adds you as a human into this.
Which is probably the most challenging and thing you can't automate and the most powerful. So you get to focus on the human to human stuff even more because
100%.
You're able to automate the things that don't have that as kind of the key reason why.
Yeah, exactly. For me, let me see, what's the paradox? So there's actually, it's called Chevron's paradox. I don't know if you heard about this. It's
No.
You might have heard about the like when ATMs came, like everyone was concerned, like, hey, all the bank tellers are losing their job. But because of ATMs, people got way more comfortable dealing with their bank, dealing with money in general. So that now they're doing way more with banks, and now there are way more bank tellers than there were before ATMs came to be. And so when it comes
Interesting. Because maybe they didn't go at all because they didn't want to deal with the people, so they didn't go to the machine. And now they're going more for the machine, but then they're going to the people to do other stuff. Okay.
ATMs everywhere. It's so much easier to deal with money. So much easier to deal with banks. And now I have way more things that I can do with the bank. And I think ultimately when it comes to AI and sales, it's like, this could really go either way. And for us, we strongly believe that this is actually going to apply because you will still, like, you just give humans the time for the human aspect of selling,
Yeah.
for identifying what matters to them on a personal level, for like having like calls are really big right now because it's actually the personal connection of like I'm actually talking to a human. And I think this will never be better with AI because it's so much easier to just say no to AI. But for humans, we often just hear them out because we are also humans. And so our hypothesis is that in, let's say, in 4 or 5 years' time, you will actually have more sellers. And we're seeing this already in our case. We're using AI. We like our SDRs are hitting now twice as many meetings as they did like 3 months ago. Like
And
three
people
months,
can
I
be more
think.
productive. So you'd want more productive people if they're able
And
to have more outcomes with these tools. Yeah.
you know what an easy conversation it is when like you tell me my SDRs 3 months ago they opened like 9, 10 opportunities per person per month. Now we're at 20. You know how
Wow.
easy that conversation is? Like
To add
give
another
me
head
more of
there.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
exactly. Exactly. No, I love it. Well, let's shift gears to make sure we kind of hit the full customer journey here to the AE side and the CSMs.
Yeah. It's interesting because I actually go back into it's actually completely the same. Like if you look at once again we're asking AEs, we like the thing is we're learning along the way what works. Like to give an example, I think by now we all know that if we multi-thread, if we bring in more people into the conversation, specifically in our case, we have three persona, sales, marketing, operations.
Mhm.
If we bring in the other two persona, we have a 5x win rate. And so therefore the ask is very logical. The very first thing our sellers do, typically have a conversation with a person in one department, like let's say
Yep.
marketing. The very first thing I do is how can I bring in the other two? And
Yep.
that means I'm reaching out. That means I'm orchestrating with marketing. But once again, it's like it's one of these things. So by the way, in addition to like running the sales process, can you now also do X? And once
Mhm.
again, easy to ask, but once it's like 17, 18, 19 things, it gets completely overwhelming. And we saw this when we checked how many of the deals had an activity in the last week. Like if you're stage 4 or below, we wanted to be in touch, like hopefully helpful, but be in touch with the buyer once a week. And the more you ask them, the more this number drops. And it was actually
Mm.
like, go look into your Salesforce and look into anything stage 4 and below, what the percentage of opportunities that weren't touched for a week. And then, like, and it's because we're asking our sellers to do, like, we ask them to create their own pipeline, to multi-thread the opportunities, to like have really good pricing, etc. So the more we ask for them, the more we see individual things dropping. And then once
Yeah.
again, we want to look at this from sales enablement to sales operations.
Yeah.
And so the excellence once again comes in where in our case, once we confirm that this is an action that helps, then it's like how much of this can we automate and
Yeah.
how much of this with either like the technology that we have or bringing AI into this, which is more and more what we do.
Totally. Yeah. So it's kind of similar you were saying to the BDR where, okay, you're asking them to do this core thing and connect with people to book meetings and create opportunities really well. There's 18 other things that they need to do. Same thing with sales. To run a really tight sales process, yes, you need to, do proper discovery and, ask the right questions and, pitch value. But then there's also like all of those little details. How do we make sure that we can put those on rails so they can focus on the core human dimension of understanding their needs and all those key pieces?
Yeah, like you mentioned discovery, and we mapped out the whole sales process, like from beginning to basically the closing, and which of these elements could, for example, AI help or technology help. And there's so many in there, but it like for me, how much more time can I put into the discovery bucket? Like for me, that's the most important one. And I don't, and this could be discovery with the individual or with like the multi-threading people that you bring in. But
Yeah.
if I can give AE time back into discovery, it helps with opportunity close rate. And so that's where, like, when we talk multi-threading, in our case, like we have two things: we advertise to them, and we reach out to other people in the buying center. So we
Yeah.
identify automatically, we prepare the emails into the different departments automatically, and so we identify this works. We had the reps do it manually, and then all right, now it's time to
Hmm.
actually automate it for them to give them time back to focus on the human elements and not the elements that can be done by technology.
Totally. I love that. So yeah, find out what works first, figure out ways to put it on rails so they could focus on kind of the core human aspect of the value.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Well, and let's
Because
wrap up.
like
Yeah, sorry, go
so
for it.
just to go back to what
Yeah,
you
yeah,
said about SDR, because if the AE doesn't spend the time on these tasks and instead spends the time on, like, I think discovery obviously, but then ultimately the closing, like, project management a little bit, but the more they can do this, once again it means they close more deals,
yeah.
which once again means that the ROI I'm getting on
On a
this
seller. Yeah,
expense, yeah, on a seller is phenomenal. And if my ROI is really good, then I want to increase that resource. So once again, for me, that's just an argument for Jeff's paradox, which means I think there will be more sellers.
totally. And a higher bar for them for sure. And to wrap up on the post sale side, CSMs, how do you think about kind of that aspect for the post sale side of things?
Um, we if we if we ask people what is like when it comes to churn, like I mean, ultimately CSMs basically I would say the two core jobs they have is prevent churn and then upsell wherever possible, right? Like provide value, which I think
Leads to those
avoids the
things. Yeah.
one, yeah, exactly. But if you ask like what is correlated with churn, like what do you
Hmm.
think it is? What would you say it is? Like the parameters?
Correlated with churn.
Yeah,
Adoption and usage is definitely a part of it, but not just that. It's actually translating that to the people that make the decision to renew or buy. And I think that's actually where a lot of CSMs teams get it wrong, is they focus too much on like purely the usage stuff and they don't get
yeah,
credit for it. So both of those
yeah,
things I think are equally important, is
yeah,
getting credit for the
yeah.
usage and adoption, but also making sure that it's there in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Like it's totally right. Like we focus so much on the usage, which totally makes sense.
Yep.
But then there is the second element, and it's correlated, but not 100%, which is the person like does the do I get credit from the person that makes the decision
Yeah,
for that usage?
exactly.
And what this requires is actually making sure that this person knows what I'm doing and knows what I'm achieving. And I wonder how often, because like so often our product is being used by the end user who could be like two levels away from the person that actually makes the decision.
At least,
And
yeah.
so how do I make sure, like, so which means that we are once again asking our CSMs to actually make sure that people are using the product, we're educating them, we have the training, but then we need to make sure that the person that makes the decision continuously knows about
Yes.
our success. And so I would say the two biggest things we did for that, and part one is really like ask for forgiveness, not permission, is like every single VP in the organization in like sales and marketing, they get our summary of here's what UserGems did for you last week.
Totally.
And they can
It's a
like
weekly cadence. That's what you start with. Wow, I love it.
yeah,
Bold.
yeah, and they can unsubscribe, but we even like the I think as always you should never optimize for like this 1% of people that are annoyed because you get so
Totally.
much more it's so easy. Like this is actually the number one thing I hear, like where I could annoy someone, and that's why I don't want to do this campaign that has so much upside.
Yeah, you got
And
to
so
be
we're
have
very
conviction that what you do is adding value, right? That's the thing that I think gets away those thoughts in the back of your mind,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I tell my organization if like there are some emails being sent out under my name, and like in December there was one email that really shouldn't have gone out under my name, but I tell them if you don't embarrass me once a month, then you're not pushing hard enough. And I just got an email yesterday again where someone like emailed me and said like, Christian, you know me, you really need to look into automatic emails, but that's totally okay because I'm like, there's so much upside in this. And so for us, it's identifying who are the decision makers. And once again, we do this automatically. But the important thing is also any new hire, like for the CS team, the worst thing that can happen is there's a new hire coming in, a new decision maker, like a new VP, new C level. Their job description is literally evaluate the organization, like evaluate your organization, identify which tools you need, which tools you don't need, which tools you want to bring in from your previous job.
Yeah,
And if they never hear from me, they might just like in months two make a decision. And the first thing I hear from them is, hey, I don't know what it does, we don't renew. And
totally.
so our goal is automatically identify this and just send them an email, put them on the weekly list, but also send them an email and say, hey, you're using UserGems, here's what we do.
Totally.
And super happy to jump on a call. And that alone, like it gives you the airtime that you need with the executive for the second part. Like this is where you avoid churn that shouldn't happen because you have the usage and you deliver the value.
Which is the most frustrating thing. I'm sure we've both been there. And you're like, what
Undoubtedly.
is going
Yeah.
on? We've done the thing. We've delivered on the value, but like you don't get credit. And if you don't get credit, none of that matters. So I think that's, well said. And people don't necessarily want to spend, CSMs don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time talking to their, someone that in their organization would be their boss's boss's boss. Right. So you need to make sure to make
Yes.
it easy for them to do those things and lower that bar.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Yeah. And we like, this is the, I often overhear like just giving the information and like people do it. And I
Yeah.
saw it in our organization where like the first step is we told them, hey, do this, like look up new decision maker, reach out to them. Barely anyone did it. Then we put it right in front of them as a task in their
Yeah.
Salesforce. A
Yeah.
few did it, but still not where it should be. And now we're just sending it automatically because once again, the upside is so much bigger than the downside of like, I email a wrong person.
I love it. I love it. Well, this was a great take on driving execution excellence. I love that we kind of spanned not just sales, but talked about post sales, talked about the BDRs, the hardest job out there. So, Christian, this was awesome. I know you got
It's
a
a
million
mess.
things to get to, and you're hosting onsite this week, so I'll let you jump. But thanks so much for taking time to share your perspective, and hopefully, folks out there listening got a few ideas for how to automate some of that execution excellence. And definitely be sure to check out UserGems.
Awesome. Excited to chat, Ross. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.